This is Miss DeVito, and today I'm going to show you how to make beef stew using the combination cooking method. This recipe will feed about 4 people. You will need the following ingredients: 1 large onion cut in a large dice, 2 stalks of celery cut in a large dice, and 1 large carrot sliced into about 1/4 inch slices, 3 cloves of garlic minced, about 2 tablespoons to 1/4 cup of olive oil, 1 cup of tomato puree, or about 1 tablespoon of tomato paste. I have 2 cups of chicken stock, and to that I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of beef base, but you can also use just 2 cups of beef stock. I have about 1 cup of white wine, but you can also use red wine. This is about 1.5 to 1 3/4 pound of chuck stew meat. Then comes my seasoning. You're going to need 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 2 teaspoons of salt, 1 teaspoon of ground black pepper, 1 tablespoon of minced parsley, and 4 medium red potatoes cut in a large dice. So first let me show you how to prepare your stew meat. So I bought this meat already pre-cut, but I still have to trim it because there is a lot of fat and silver skin, and they're very large in size. So I want to cut them down to about 1.5 to 2 inch cubes. So when trimming this meat, you really want to be careful. You want to take off any big chunks of fat that are on the outsides of the meat. Those are called intermuscular fat. Any of the small lines in between the muscles, that is called intramuscular fat, and that is the fat that we want to keep. But any large chunks we want to get rid of. While trimming, if you see any of this connective tissue that you feel you don't want to add to your dish, trim it away. Just make sure that we are keeping as much of the muscle, as much of the red meat that we possibly can. If you see here, this is silver skin. This is a very thin membrane on the meat that will not break down during the cooking process, so you really need to remove that. It will not get. So now that I have cleaned the beef, I'm going to season it. So right now I'm going to season it with the garlic powder, the onion powder, the salt, and the pepper. Then I'm going to add the flour. The flour is going to help us get a really nice brown, and it's also going to help in thickening the stew. So I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of olive oil to my pan. You can see that my pan is nice and hot by the way that when the oil is added to the pan, it starts to kind of glisten or shimmer. And I am going to sear the meat now. This may seem a little bit time consuming, but I'm going to take one piece and place it in the pan at a time. I want to space them apart from each other because the more I overcrowd the pan, the cooler it becomes. It will actually lower the temperature of the oil, and it would cause the items to steam. So I want to wait until they are nice and brown on one side, and then I'm going to turn them over and let them brown on the other side. When they are browned on both sides, I'm going to take them out of the pan and get ready for my second batch. I have not added all of the meat into this pan at one time because I want to have really beautiful browning. Great flavor is coming from this searing or browning. The browning or the searing that you see here happening is called the Maillard reaction. And the Maillard reaction involves sugars breaking down and reacting with the amino acids at high temperatures. So you find amino acids in proteins. So there is a chemical reaction that's actually going on in the pan while I am searing the meat. By taking the time during this step is where we're really going to get some great flavor in our stew. It is the foundation of the flavor right now. If you feel like you don't have enough oil in the bottom of the pan because some of it isn't being absorbed by the oil, You can absolutely add 1 or 2 tablespoons more. That's why in the beginning I said that the recipe is from 2 tablespoons to 1/4 of a cup of olive oil. Now that I have finished searing all of the meat, I'm actually going to start to sear the vegetables. Getting a little bit of flavor and caramelization on these vegetables is going to be the next step of our flavor foundation in this stew. So if you need to add a little bit more oil at this point, you can absolutely do that as well, but do not pour any excess oil out of the pan at this point. I'm going to let these cook for about the heat on the stovetop, because as you want the pot to be very hot, you want to make sure that you are not burning anything on the bottom. So now that my vegetables are cooked, I'm going to add my meat. I'm going to stir them together. And now I'm going to add my minced garlic. Okay, I like to wait until the end, right before I'm getting ready to add my liquid, because I don't want it to brown and burn and get bitter. I'm going to mix it around for about 30 seconds. And then I can add any remaining flour that I have left in my bowl. Stir it so that it is incorporated well. And then I'm going to add my tomato product. You can use tomato puree, or you can traditionally use tomato paste, but I didn't have any tomato paste. I'm going to stir this around, and then I'm going to get ready to deglaze the bottom of my pan. Now all those brown bits that are on the bottom of the pan, they are called fond, spelled F-O-N-D. They are the caramelized bits that stuck to the bottom of the pan. And when I add my liquid, when I deglaze with my wine, when I add my stock, they're going to help make my sauce, right? So they are a very important aspect of this dish. This is the reason why temperature is a major thing that needs to be controlled during this process, because you do not want them to burn. So I'm going to add my wine, white wine or red wine. You can use, or cooking wine. Just make sure if you use cooking wine, it has a lot of extra salt, so you have to modify your salt in your recipe. So what I'm going to do is, after I add my liquid, I'm going to scrape the bottom of the pan slightly, just to make sure that I can release any of that fond. And you can see that the sauce is already starting to thicken slightly, because it is reacting with the heat and the flour that was on the stew meat. Now I'm going to add my potatoes. I'm going to stir them in well, and then I'm going to add stock. Remember, you can use beef stock. I only had chicken stock, so I want to add a little bit of beef base or bouillon for a little bit of extra flavor. Now I don't want to completely submerge this stew. I just need enough liquid to slightly come up to the top of the ingredients. Cook them. If I add too much liquid, what's going to happen is I'm going to have a liquidy sauce instead of a nicely thickened sauce at the end of the cooking process. So right now I'm going to bring the stew up to a simmer. When it comes up to a simmer, I'm going to cover it with aluminum foil, or you can use a lid, and I'm going to place it in the oven. You could cook this right on the stove top if you wanted to, but you would have to make sure to constantly check the temperature of your stove, because the oven has a more controlled temperature than the stove top. I'm going to place it in my 350 degree preheated oven for about 2 to 2.5 hours. The chuck cut of beef comes from the neck, upper arm, and shoulder blade of the cow, and so it is very tough meat but very flavorful, so that's why it takes a long time. I'm going to take it out of the oven and check it. When my potato and my beef are fork tender, they are ready. Fork tender means that there's no resistance. It's easy for me to cut through. I'm going to garnish with some parsley, some frozen peas and corn if you have any, just for a little bit of pop of color at the end. And then I'm ready to serve it just like this or over rice or egg noodles. Hope you enjoyed this recipe. Please let us know if you try it out. If you want to see more videos like this, subscribe to our page to see more like it.